It's a wonderful Friday morning, and you are welcome once again to our Shifting Blame series. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are joining us from in the world. My name is Florence Topher, and I'm the director of Mobile Web Ghana, and I am happy and excited to be your moderator for today. And I'm presenting from American Corner Agbogba. American Corner Agbogba is part of the American spaces we have in the world. American spaces provide access to current and reliable information about the United States. And we are doing this through book collections, internet access, events, and activities for everyone. If you want to join any of the American spaces at where you are, please look out for more information online, and you will be able to join the American spaces and benefit from all this that we are offering. Today, we are excited and we'll be discussing a very important topic related to Shifting Blame series. And the topic is sex trafficking, its causes, impacts on women and girls in society. Facilitating this session is Rabina Jones, a program officer of the ARC Foundation, Ghana. Rabina Jones is a graduate of the University of Ghana with a bachelor's degree in political science and sociology. She currently works at the ARC Foundation, Ghana as the programs officer. Rabina is passionate about subjects on justice, the rights of women, children, and breaking prejudices about the role of females in society. Also, she's someone who believes, insists, and moves for what is right and honest. Her two favorite things to do are reading and playing video games. Rabina, we're going to play video games soon. So during this session, please type all your comments and questions in the comment box below, and they will be addressed by our facilitator for today. Thank you for joining us and staying tuned. And now I hand it all over to Rabina Jones. Rabina Jones, please go ahead, take us through what you have for us today.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Florence. Yeah, so good morning, everyone. Yeah, so as Ms. Florence said, that today we are going through the topic of sex trafficking, its causes and impact on women and girls in society. So actually this topic is, how do I put it? I actually chose this topic because we've seen that this thing is a growing menace in our societies, and it needs to be.
Rabina, can you give us a full screen presentation mode? That would be beautiful. Full screen presentation. Other than that, we can just go ahead and do it. Okay. Oh, please go ahead.
Okay. Right. So, yeah. So as I said, it's a growing menace in our societies that it needs to be kept. And I would like to share with you, I would like for you to go along with me on this journey of sharing sex trafficking, its causes and impacts on society and women and girls. So, so the outline of this presentation is what sex trafficking is, its causes, impacts on society, women and girls, recommended measures to mitigate it, and conclusion. So basically, what is sex trafficking? As we can see defined here, that it's the crime of using fraud, force, or coercion to induce another individual to sell sex. Sex trafficking, it's a modern day slavery, as it's all defined all over. That's it's a form of modern day slavery that it needs to be addressed. And it really needs to be addressed very well. And that one interesting thing that I actually did come across was that trafficking doesn't always have to involve crossing borders, and that it can even occur in the person's country, within the borders of the person's country or the person's society. So, but for children, when it comes to the issue of children, sex trafficking doesn't matter if they cross borders or if they didn't cross borders or if they were in the same country. So long as the child is being exploited for the purposes of sex, then it involves sex trafficking. So we can see that the International Labour Organization estimates that a minimum of 2.5 million people are trapped in situations of forced labor. And a percentage of that, 43% of 2.5 million people are estimated to be trafficked for the purposes of sexual exploitation. We can see that this is really a terrible problem in our society. It has immense impacts. It has immense consequences on our economies. It has immense impacts and consequences on the physical, social, and mental well-being of the victims. And it's something that we, as I said initially, it has to be really addressed because it's a growing menace in our society. We've received some cases from the International Justice, IGM. We've received certain cases from IOCO, the anti-trafficking unit of IOCO. We've received trafficking cases all over. And most of these trafficking cases that came in were sex trafficking cases. And we've seen that it affects not just, it affects adolescent girls, because we've had cases where some of the victims were, the ages of these victims were as low as 13 years, and they were trafficked from Nigeria to Ghana here. Normally, we used to hear that, oh, trafficking, normally we've always heard that trafficking occurs from low-income countries to high-income countries, or from the third world countries to the first world countries. But we've seen that there's a shift. There's a shift now, that nowadays, even within the third world countries or low-income countries, trafficking is occurring. And it made me wonder, what are these girls being told? Because, as I said, we are all low-income countries, and normally sex trafficking occurs when the agents or the individuals or the perpetrators of the crime usually inform the women or the girls that, okay, I'm taking you to a better place than where you are now, where you'll be earning high income or high money, or you'll be earning better pay, or your standard of living will change. It will be better than what it is here. So it made me wonder, what are these girls being told for them to agree to be trafficked to another third world or another low-income country, where you still wouldn't be earning any much, or your life wouldn't be better off than what it was in your own home country? So, as I said, yeah, it gives you a pause. It makes you wonder what causes this crime to continue. So, in this next slide, we're going to talk about the causes of this crime. And I'll share with you some economic factors of sex trafficking. And it says that at its core, trafficking is as a result of women's unequal economic status. Of the world's poor, a large portion are women. And more frequently than men, women face discrimination in employment opportunities. And we can all attest to that fact, that yes, a large portion of women are poor. Most women face a lot of discrimination in employment opportunities, because most of the time, sometimes women also have that burden of child caring. So with that burden of child caring, they also face that, yes, it's one of the factors that makes them face discrimination in employment opportunities, because it's like there are certain jobs that it's like there are certain jobs, because you have children to care for, it limits the time, or it limits the how do I put it, the time frame of the demands of the job. Yes, let me put it that way. It limits you from performing the role of the demands of the job. So for example, let's say you want to, how do I put it? You are applying for a job at a manufacturing company. You know, sometimes these manufacturing companies actually do work in shifts, or maybe you're applying for, or maybe you're applying for a job as a security personnel somewhere. They do work in shifts, and you know, if you're giving a night shift, you will start wondering that, okay, so how would I be, who is going to cater for, and especially if you're also a single mother and you have nobody to take care of these children for you, you will be wondering who's going to take care of these children for you. And even the employer might also wonder that, okay, if you have children, then I mean, like, the hours of the work wouldn't allow you, or the demands of the job wouldn't allow you to perform your role, to the degree that they're looking for. Yes. So current global, so the second one says that current global economic strategies heighten this unequal economic condition amongst women. For instance, the democratization of formerly socialist countries has resulted in huge losses at the social, economic, and political levels, evidenced by women's higher unemployment rates, or the elimination of childcare options due to the breakdown of socialist infrastructures. And we've seen these things happen in most of these Eastern European and Central European countries, where there are a lot of social interventions have been cancelled because of the move from communist ideologies to the free market system. And in the free market system, I mean, like, the free market system, government spending is reduced drastically, it's reduced a lot. So this has affected a lot of women in these countries, and they have found themselves in situations that makes them vulnerable to trafficking and exploitation. And one other economic factor is the disparities that exist between and within countries that promotes trafficking. Trafficking takes place from low-income countries to high-income. As I initially mentioned, that we've received certain cases that girls were trafficked in from other low-income countries to low-income countries, and it makes you wonder what stories these girls are being fed with, because normally we've always heard that trafficking occurs from low-income countries to high-income countries, where the demand for cheap labor does exist. So typically, traffickers target women and girls who are in their home country or regions and transport them to wealthier countries for sexual exploitation. So, as I initially mentioned in the definition, that is a use of fraud or force or coercion. Yes. So, as I usually mentioned, there is a use of fraud or force or coercion. I've realized that, or we've come to see that, or cases that we have received, it seems that when this happens, most of these perpetrators of the crime, they feed the girls with false stories. They glamorize the sort of jobs that they are going to do in these high-income countries. And later, the girls actually do find out that, what they were fed with, or the story, or the information they were given was actually false. They weren't sent to these countries for the purposes of, or for the jobs that were recruited for. They were sent for a different purpose, which is being sold in prostitution rings, yes, or being sold into brothels. So typically, as I initially mentioned, the sex trafficking occurs from low income.
Reverend, this is an exciting topic. I'm encouraging participants to really post questions. You can click on the arrow down, the one that looks like a button, and there the slideshow will pop up. And so, like, this is an interesting topic topic, and we are talking about the causes of sex trafficking. And please, if you have any question on this, please post it in the comment box, and we will take all your questions, and then we would present your question to our facilitator, and that would be an interesting engagement we would have with you. Thank you very much for staying tuned, and over to you, Rabna.
Right. So, one other cause of sex trafficking as domestic violence, research conducted has shown that victims of domestic violence are at risk of becoming victims of sex trafficking when they seek work abroad in order to leave the abusive situations. We've come to see that most people in abusive situations it's like they don't know how to get out of the situation that they are in. They find fewer ways to escape their situations, because let's be honest, a lot of there aren't enough interventions in most countries to help victims of domestic violence get out of the situation that they are in. So it's like this is one channel. Traveling abroad to seek for work as one avenue that victims of domestic violence have found to be a way of getting out of their situation or escaping their situation. I would like for us to look at one case story of one lady here, whose name is Sandra, of 20 years. She was living with both parents, but due to the frequent abuse of her father towards her mother, she decided to leave home and then look for work abroad. But apparently, unknown to her, she actually went over to stay with her cousin, but unknown to her, her cousin had actually sold her off to a prostitution ring for an amount of 5,000 euros. Upon arriving there, she realized that, well, what her cousin had told, the information the cousin had fed her with, that she was going to work as something else, there wasn't what it actually was, but she had been trafficked for sexual exploitation. So we have similar cases, so many similar cases like Sandra's own. And this is so real. This is things that have happened, and I wish that countries will create more interventions to help domestic violence victims get out of their situation, so they don't see or they don't feel like the only way, or one only way to able to get out of their situation is through looking for work abroad. And one other cause of sex trafficking is the search for a better life and desire to travel. One case story is this is actually one case that we actually did receive at the ACT Foundation. I say stories. Doris lived in her village in Ghana here, around the Eastern region area. She was working as a hairdresser, or a hairstylist, or a hairdresser, as we call it in Ghana here. Her job didn't actually pay much, it doesn't actually fetch much in her village. I mean, she wouldn't be able to charge that much. So there was some agents in her area who she came across that agent, and the agent fed her some story that, oh, I'm sending you over to Oman, that you can work there as a domestic help and you would earn good money. She believed, she paid, and usually this is the thing that happens, that these agents don't do these things for free. You actually have to pay, the victim actually have to pay for some amount, you have to pay some amount of money to be sold off. And that's the irony of the whole situation. You're paying, how do I put it? You're paying for the pain that you're going to experience later. You're paying for the trauma. You're paying some amount of money. And it's not small amounts of money that these victims do pay. They pay huge sums of money to go and experience trauma, to go and experience pain, to go and experience harsh and sordid situations. And that's the irony of the whole thing. And she was told she was going to Oman. She actually never arrived in Oman. She got to Libya. Somebody collected her from Libya, and then she was actually a pimp who collected her from Libya, and all her travel documents and phone was seized. And that is what usually happens when these victims get to their destinations. All their travel documents and any communication, any digital communication channel that you do have is also seized. So you cannot contact anybody and tell them that my family, this is the situation I'm in now. Get me help. You're not able to contact anybody. Your travel documents are taken away from you, so you cannot escape. And she was made to live in sordid situations with other girls from other African countries, all trafficked for the purposes of sexual exploitation. I've come to also see that it looks like, as we mentioned, that because of the economic disparities between countries, it looks like a lot of these sex traffic victims come from poor African countries and poor Asian countries and poor Latin American countries. And as we were saying, the economic disparities it's really leaving these girls vulnerable. It says that poverty compels many women to look abroad in search for better lives. The attempt to explore the world through employment agencies or study abroad programs without knowing the agencies are legitimate. This leads them to being found in dire situations, such as in the case of Doris. Another cause for sex trafficking is demand for women's sexual services. The trafficking of women into the commercial sex industry is primarily to countries in which prostitution and the provision of other sexual services are either tolerated or legal. An article written by a lecturer in the Department of Law says that trafficking in women and children is connected to the existence of legal, semi-legal, or illegal markets. And these existence of the markets is directly connected to the fact that there are men who are willing to pay for sex in all its varied and exploitative forms. And it's true. They said that if there's a demand for something, there's always a supply. So long as there's a demand for commercial sex, for commercial sex in all its varied and exploitative forms, and there are men who have the money who are willing to pay and they do not mind, sex trafficking will continue, and criminals or perpetrators of this crime will continue to feed this market. So another cause is the conflict zones and militarization. We've come to also see, especially in most African, I would link this to African countries, because we've seen that there's a lot of instability in some African countries. I mean, we've seen coups, we've heard of coups, wars, we've heard of these rebel soldiers in some of these African countries that are causing so much instability. In the wake of conflict in most of these countries, it weakens border controls and facilitates the movement of women from country to country. High levels of corruption are also found in conflict zones, where separatist regimes may be funded by such activities as kidnapping, trade in narcotics, or sex trafficking of women and girls. Yeah, so as is said here, that most of these regimes, since the states is in the countries are in a state of dysfunction, there's no money coming in, nobody is investing in the country, so they need coffers. I mean, like, every country needs to be run by money. So these rebel soldiers or these separatist regimes, they need money to be able to run whatever it is that they are doing in these countries. And some of them are funded by all kinds of activities, including sex trafficking of women and girls. And we can all agree that even though it's a crime, like us in the trade of narcotics, it's actually a lucrative crime. it fetches a lot of money. Unlike trading narcotics, where these drugs are sold one time, with sex trafficking or trafficking of women and girls for sexual exploitation, these people can be resold over and over and over again. So it's really lucrative. So they actually do make huge sums of money from this business. Conflict also results in increased military presence. The state in both conflict and post-conflict areas is often followed by the development of the sex industry there. And that is so, so true. So long as troops are, soldiers or troops are stationed in one particular place, the sex industry, you find you just find it booming all of a sudden. You don't know where it came out from, but you just find it rise all of a sudden just to cater for the soldiers who are there. Victims of trafficking usually are delivered to brothels that serve the military bases. Military involvement in trafficking and prostitution ranges from ignoring the problem and failing to discipline troops to actual regulation of the sex trade. And we found this to be very, very true. I've heard stories of people who went for peacekeeping in certain countries. I mean, like, these are first-hand accounts from the soldiers themselves that participated or that were, how do I put it, complicit in this crime by patronizing victims of sex trafficking. For them, it's like, well, there's nothing that we can do about it. We were there for other purposes. These brothels have sprung up. And I mean, like, sexual desire is a natural desire. It needs to be, how do I put it? It needs to be satisfied, or they need to scratch that itch. So we don't really mind if, we don't really mind, and neither do we really care. We can turn a blind eye to it that these girls are actually, and some actually did know that the girls were actually trafficked for sexual exploitation, because some of the girls actually just share their stories with them. And they do also sometimes tell the girls that, okay, we will find ways and means to get you out of this situation. But, well, they never did. They were all lies. And they left their peacekeeping stations. They returned to Ghana, and we don't know what has happened to these girls. So we move on to the impact on women and girls. So this crime has several impacts on women and girls. It has physical, it has psychological, it has social impact. And the physical impact, we can all attest with that. Sexual exploitation, it makes traffic victims prone to or vulnerable to sexually transmitted diseases, all forms, AIDS. I mean, like, you go to, I've seen some few documentaries, read some few materials, articles online on the physical impact, and it looks like HIV/AIDS is a prevalent physical impact on most of these victims. I mean, like, it's so widespread among most of these victims. Gonorrhea, syphilis, they experience all kinds of trauma. They experience all kinds of physical trauma. Sex traffic victims are often physically abused as well. They are tortured. I mean, no, there's no form of protection for them in any way, and nobody really cares, because it's like, you are here. They are not treated in a humane way. They are not even viewed as human beings by their madams or by their pimps. All you are here for, they are treated as objects. I mean, like, you're just here to make money for us by selling your body. So they are not treated as human beings. They are physically abused and tortured. Some of these men who patronize their services sometimes hits them. They physically abuse them. They hit them, they kick them, they make all forms. And some of these men that also visit or patronize their services have certain perverse, they do not they find it easier to try it on, they find it easier to try them on these victims of sexual trafficking, because as I said, they are not viewed as human beings. Some of these men are actually people who do have wives with them, because their wives may not stand for it, but it's the victims of sex trafficking that they do try them on, because, well, we don't see you to be a human being. You're just an object here that I'm just using to satisfy my cravings. Yeah, some of them have broken bones, broken teeth, all kinds of injuries, brain injuries, which result in memory losses and headaches. And sometimes they are subjected to food deprivation, which results in malnutrition too as well. Sometimes the food deprivation is used by their pimps and their madams as a way for them to comply. Sometimes these victims, they get to a certain point that they feel like, well, I'm tired, I'm not going to continue with this thing anymore. And it's for the madams and the pimps, you can't tell them that, because it means that they are going to lose out. They are losing money. So food deprivation is one of the ways that they one of the ways that they use on these victims for them to comply, or sometimes they beat you, they set some guys on you and they beat you up. There was one case that we received at the ACT Foundation. There was one Nigerian national who was trafficked to Ghana. She was actually in the university, but then she was having some issues at home and she ran away from home. She contacted someone in Ghana here who she contacted some, I think she was a friend that she contacted here in Ghana, and the lady told her, okay, I can set you up, and I can set you up with a job at some organization. She came down here thinking, okay, I have a good job that I'm going to do. She came here and was actually not that at all. She had been sold off to one madam, and that madam too was initially somebody who had also been trafficked for sexual exploitation. But now she was a madam and she was earning good money from, she had now become a madam, and she was also dealing in this trade. And she was also living a luxurious life from the monies that these girls were making for her, because most of these girls, the monies that they do make for her, she wasn't really feeding them. She wasn't really taking care of them. She did basically nothing for them. And there was at this point that the lady said she told the madam that she didn't want to do this thing anymore. What she did was she got some guys from the neighborhood and they beat her up. They really battered her just so that she could comply to the rules, or she could comply to the women's tenets. So long story short, she was able to escape. She came to us. Actually, EOCO, the anti-trafficking unit of the EOCO, that's the economic crime units here. They brought her to us, and then we provided some shelter for her. And eventually, she was taken back to her country, and then reunited with her family. Another impact is the psychological impact it has on these victims. They suffer a lot of severe psychological trauma from the daily mental, emotional, and psychological abuse and torture. They are assuaged with feelings of helplessness, shame, self-hatred, confusion, and suicidal thoughts. And that is very true, suicidal thoughts and helplessness, because most of the stories most of the cases that we have received, this is one of the things, these are the things that they keep sharing with us, that I felt so helpless. I was so ashamed. I hate myself now, because some of them feel like it was their fault that they got into the situation that they are in. Maybe if they had been smarter, they could have known that there were loopholes or there were holes in the story that they were being fed. Or if they hadn't run away from home, or maybe if they had been obedient to their parents, they wouldn't have found themselves in the situation that they are in. So most of them actually experience self-hatred. It's like, now I hate myself, and I feel dirty. That's one thing that a lot of them do say. I feel dirty. I don't know if my family will accept me again. And they are confused. It's like, now that I have escaped, now what do I do? Where do I go from here? How do I put my life back together? And most of them are actually suicidal. So usually when these victims are referred to us for shelter services, we are extra careful with them. We monitor them very well, because you just might never know when you go into their room what they may have done, if they have taken an overdose of drugs. So or if they have cut themselves with a knife or any sharp object. So we just make sure we are very careful when they are referred to us for shelter services. We make sure that all these things are not in easy reach of them, because most do come in and they are so traumatized. It's like, right now, where do I go from here? And the kind of experience that they have had, I mean, when they share these experiences, you just cannot imagine how one other person or one human being can be so inhumane to another human being. You just can't imagine how one person can think of such evil to act out on another human being. And they really do need help, and they really need all the supports that families, friends, and then their countries too can give as well. And most of them also do develop substance abuse problems or addictions to be able to cope or escape their desperate situations. And that is so true. As I said, a lot of cases that we have received, there was one case that we received, and the lady came in brutally drunk. She smelled from head to toe of alcohol. She smoked weed, all kinds of things. So we told her, for our shelter, you cannot get access to these things. And we hope that you can sleep, because we asked her why she just take alcohol. And she said, that's the only way I can sleep. Because if I don't drown out my thoughts with alcohol, I wouldn't be able to sleep. So it goes to show you the kind of trauma they have been through, or the terrible experiences that they have been through, for them to soak themselves in alcohol or drug abuse just to be able to sleep. It is really terrible. And one other impact as well is the social aspect. Oops, sorry about that. The social aspect. It's evidence that a greater number of victims are, how do I put it? Should I say, I wouldn't want to use, yes, the word there on the slide is illiteracy, but with the other, I think I shared one case story with you that I think Doris, yeah, she couldn't read or write. She had never been to school. So the evidence of these victims that they've never been to school, homelessness, poverty, social isolation, trafficked women engaging in sex work tend to have limited options, fewer resources. And with these fewer resources and limited options, it makes them vulnerable to violence and abuse than women who are not trafficked. And it's true. Most of these predators or perpetrators of sex trafficking, they target women who haven't been to school, or they do not have a very high level of education, or they are homeless, or their economic situation, it's not that robust, it's really bad. They target these people because they feel like, okay, these ones are the vulnerable ones. I mean, like, they lack basic social amenities, and even they lack basic social amenities, they lack basic life amenities, food, water, shelter. So it makes them vulnerable. It makes them absolutely vulnerable, because there's no way somebody who has all these things and more will fall for some of these lies that these perpetrators of the crime, they feed to these victims. Because when you hear some of the stories that these victims who are referred to as they tell, you can see that they're actually loopholes. There were actually loopholes in these stories. So you can see that maybe, and that's how they also do feel like that maybe if I had been smarter, or maybe if I had gone to school, or if I had maybe informed somebody else of this thing that I had wanted to do, I wouldn't have landed in this situation that I am in. Because when you lack for nothing, you wouldn't want to move to another country that, oh, I am moving to another country to see greener pastures. Unless maybe you're working in a good organization in one country, and the organization is transferring you to another branch in another country. Yes, that one does exist, but not in situations where you, as I said, you lack social basic life amenities and you really want more. And these people are telling you that, yes, I have a job for you somewhere else that you're going to earn more. And this actually is this topic I'm discussing here is also very close to me, because I had a cousin who was actually exploited this way. She met somebody somewhere, and this person told her that he's a pastor and he was interested in marrying her, and God has spoken to him that she was his wife. Well, how she believed that, we don't know. And they had started the process of getting her out of the country to Jordan. And she didn't tell anybody. She told nobody that this is what she was doing, till the very night that she was traveling, that she informed the family that this is the situation, that I'm traveling. And nobody understood why she was traveling, honestly, because yes, I wouldn't say she lacked basic social amenities, or she was sheltered. She's been to school. Yes, she has a few, how do I put it, challenges when it comes to academic challenges. Yes, she does have a few academic challenges and one or two learning disabilities that made school such a drag for her. So she's been to some school, but I think that her thought processes really, her cognitive and thought processes really weren't up to par with somebody who, how do I put it, is mentally, everything is properly developed. So this is the story that she was fed with, and she did travel. She actually did get to Jordan. However, when she got there, it wasn't what she was expecting. And thankfully, we have received her. She's come back after 4 years. Thankfully, we received her. She's come back after 4 years, but she's not the same person who left the shores of this country. She came back totally different. She came back and I couldn't recognize her. I saw her and I screamed. And so this thing is really close to me. I have experienced it first, and I've seen cases. I've seen the lives of these victims, and we've seen what this thing is doing to them. And it's terrible. It's really, really terrible. And it's not just them that it's affecting our societies as well. And I mean, like, the economic impacts it has on societies, it's also terrible. Black markets profits are not taxed. Profits made from sex trafficking cannot stimulate the economy, as they are kept circulating between criminal organizations and terrorist groups, financing illegal drugs, arms deal, and corrupt, abusive regimes. Underground markets of this nature undermine the economy and siphon currency away from legitimate business interactions. And this is quite, as I said, this is true. And another impact on our society is human trafficking needs government funding help. Most of these victims who are reintegrated back into their societies, they find it hard. They are not able to reintegrate properly, because some of them do come in sick. We've seen some cases like that. We've heard stories like that. Some come in sick. People who could have been fully functioning members of society, contributing to the economy, they've had their bodies being destroyed by having been enslaved, by having gone through physical trauma, psychological trauma, social trauma. They have had their psyches being battered, and they need support. They need government funding. They need they need the the welfare systems to be able to stay afloat in their societies. For countries like low-income countries where we do not have these government funding and government welfare programs like some countries do have abroad, it's extremely, or it's harder on these victims, because now they come in and we don't have money to, where do we even start from? We don't even have money to basically there's nothing. So if it's not your family that gives you that support, where do you go? So it's like either when you don't have that kind of support from the family, or you have no support from the family, you're susceptible to join other forms of criminal activities just to be able to survive, because there are some people who they come in and they are still okay to be able to work, but obtaining jobs too are hard for them because of their criminal records associated with their backgrounds. So it makes it quite hard for these victims of sex trafficking to be able to get jobs. And so move to recommended measures to mitigate sex trafficking. It stated non-liability and non-punishment of trafficking victims. Studies have documented that assistance and support is often not forthcoming from victims' homeland, nor is it available from the host country. This is, I've heard cases like this. I've seen stories like this. I've heard cases like this from the news. We've received cases like this where the host country and then the victim's home country are not really willing to support, because there's this thing of victimization of victims, or of victims of sexual trafficking, because it's like, you should have known better. We've told you stories that you should not move or travel to these Gulf countries that you are searching for a job. They are all lies. You're not going to be treated well. You've heard stories and stories on the news all the time. So why do you keep believing these agents when they come and feed you these stories that there's a better life out there somewhere? And then you carry these huge amounts of money to give to these agents when you could have used that money to start some businesses. We've heard these kinds of stories because, most victims are victimized by the society, and their countries and then their homeland countries and the host countries are not willing to help. There was one time I heard in the news some years back of some people that had been trapped in one embassy of their home countries, and then their home countries weren't willing to support them or to repatriate them back into the country, because it's like, we've told you not to go. We've shared so much stories with you concerning these situations. They have found themselves in one Gulf country, and the kind of stories that I had heard on that news that day, was actually even traumatizing for me. And there was one other story too that I heard on the news, but this time the girl was repatriated all right, but she came back in a wheelchair. She left very healthy. She came back in a wheelchair, all because that one particular day she just refused to have sex with the man she was working for and 3 other friends. And they were living in a very high-rise building. They threw her up from the building down to the ground, and she broke her leg, she broke her spine. How she didn't die or how she even survived that, it's even beyond anybody's understanding. But she just came back in a wheelchair. And the amount of money that she actually did carry, she paid this agent to get to that Gulf country, is huge. So it's like people were blaming her. She was being victimized. They were blaming her that, okay, so if you had this amount of money, if your parents had this amount of money in the collect, because she was asked how she was able to get that huge amount of money to pay the agents. She said her parents asked people, they borrowed money from other people to be able to pay that agent. And they were asking, okay, if we're able to do that, why didn't you invest that money, set up a small scale business and earn some income from it, instead of traveling all the way to this place, and you came back like this. So so in this situation, it's not the time for victims to be blamed for what has happened to them. Governments should not prosecute or punish traffic victims for trafficking related offenses, or for offenses they engage in as part of being trafficked, such as holding false passports, illegal entry, or working without authorization, because most of these victims that are trafficked to other countries do not have any form of work permits to work in any form or in any way. Even if you are trafficked to a country where prostitution is legal, however, you still need a work permit to be able to work in that industry. So working with authorization, without authorization, illegal entry, yes. Most of these traffic victims do enter countries illegally. They circumvent the migration laws. The agents circumvent the migration laws and push these victims into these countries. I've seen one documentary where people were traveling through the Libyan deserts. They traveled from one destination, and this is what they were doing. You travel from one destination to a particular destination in the desert. Somebody else collects you into a truck, and then they transport them from one destination. So we're driving in short bits and spaces. So they were able to get to that particular destination they were getting to in Libya. And when they got there too, they were put in airboats, those blow-up boats. And for a boat that was supposed to carry just 20 people was filled with 150 people. They were overcrowded on those boats. And how they, I mean, like, it's a boat where it's so fragile that immediately I just prick a pin into that boat, it's going to deflate and burst. And most of these people didn't even know how to swim. And there were babies, women who were carrying babies on these boats, women who were carrying 2-year-old toddlers on these boats. And you were wondering, was their situation that bad for them to agree to even go through this process of getting to where they wanted to get to, of getting to their land of milk and honey? Let me put it that way.
It's a good place to really come in and ask, is the situation that bad? We are running out of time and we could be taking questions. So if you have, is this your last slides?
Yeah, these are my last slides.
Okay, then you can conclude on it and then we take questions quickly.
Okay, so these are other strategies or measures to mitigate sex trafficking. Gender education and public awareness programs may be effective in changing male attitudes about women and commercial sex work, and in protecting potential victims of trafficking. Strategies for fighting government corruption can include the creation of internal affairs departments within the government structure, as well as prosecution of members of the government who are found to have been complicit in trafficking. Because we come to realize that there are some government officials that are also complicit in trafficking. So in conclusion, it's particularly important to cultivate community support networks that facilitate the sharing of experiences by survivors. Research has shown that sharing the experience with other survivors is one of the most effective and least costly forms of support. And providing them with shelter, visas, access to health, psychosocial counseling, and legal services will only not benefit the victims, but also help the justice system in securing convictions of traffickers. Thank you very much. And
thank you, Rabina. Thank you, Rabina. It's been a wonderful education for us to know more about sex trafficking. And there are a couple of questions around, and I want to ask my first question. And I think at some point of your presentation, you touched on it. These cases keep happening over and over again. It's like since time immemorial, we keep hearing about sex trafficking. Why do we still have it in the 21st century? I mean, at a point you mentioned that if there's a demand, there would be a supply. We have other organizations working in the area of sex trafficking, like ACT Foundation and other organizations as well. Why do we still have this problem? Why are we still talking about it as it's a big problem?
Yes. So as I initially mentioned in my presentation, that if there's a demand, there's always a supply. So the demand hasn't been kept. The demand for sex, because as I said, sex is a natural, the desire for sex is a natural desire, it's a natural something. But then there are some people who have perverse sexual imaginations, and these things haven't been targeted, they haven't been addressed in the way they are supposed to be addressed. The demands haven't been kept. And maybe if governments should create policies where if government should write up or create policies which targets the demand for sex, or maybe they criminalize that demand for sex. Yes, there may be certain countries that prostitution is legal, but there are most countries that it's illegal. So if government was able to create policies or enact legal laws where they targets or address the demand for sex, I mean, like, it would also help to cut this thing down, because it's really still, this issue is really prevalent in our societies. It's not coming down. It's not reducing. It's still high up there, because yeah, the demand is still there, and it's a lucrative business too as well. It's really lucrative, like the narcotics business is really lucrative. Even with all the laws that has been created concerning narcotics, people are still finding their ways through. But however, when you are caught, you'll be prosecuted. But here lies the case that the demand is not criminalized. And it's even hard to catch these traffickers, because most victims do not even want to report, because they are afraid that if I should report, I'll be victimized. Or me, myself, I would also be prosecuted for participating in crime, for being complicit in this thing. So I think that should answer it. I hope so.
And so my last, well, a couple of other questions as well. And I mean, if there is demand, there is supply, interesting. And if someone has been trafficked for sex, if someone has been trafficked for sex, is there a way the person can come out of it? Is there a way out of it?
If somebody has been contracted.
Trafficked,
right. If somebody has been trafficked for sex, is there a way to come out of it?
Yes. Or usually, what are the measures the person must take to come out? Or to be rescued?
Usually it's difficult. I'll talk from the standpoint of the cases that we have received. Usually it's actually very difficult for them to come out of it, because there are no avenues for you to be able to do that. These pimps and these madams, they do not create any avenue, because they're also trying to protect their business and protect themselves, because they know they're engaged in criminal activities. So they don't create those spaces or create the avenues for you to get out of it. So most of the time what they do is that they escape, they do run away, they find ways and means. So it's like, I'm meeting this client here. Initially, when they do come in, the clients, they have a space that they do keep them in, and the clients come to visit them in those homes. But then as they gain trust of the pimps and the madams, they begin to start moving out to meet clients in other locations. So it's in that space when I'm meeting a client in another location, that's when they're able to escape, get a phone from someone, because they usually do not even have phones to contact anybody. Get a phone from somebody, and then if you're able to call the police, if you're able to call an emergency contact or anybody, that's when they're able to get out of situations. But apart from that, I do not know how, because as I said, they do not create those avenues for you to escape. Their security is actually tight, and sometimes if you're not careful and you contact a corrupt government, a corrupt law enforcement officer, you might find yourself in trouble, because some of the cases that we have received, victims have mentioned that these pimps and madams or these traffickers are actually in bed with some corrupt officials, and some of these law enforcement officials actually do patronize them. So you just have to be really careful how you get out. I don't know, but most of the time that's how they do get out. But you have to be really careful who you even contact.
So you mean that when you are in it, there is no escape, there is no way out. There's no clear-cut way out.
There's no clear-cut way out.
Unless luck shines on you one day and you have the opportunity to escape.
Right.
Beautiful. So I really want to understand, one of the questions on the table is, if we bring these people in, you mentioned that it's difficult for you to restore them back to normal. What are some of the activities that can be done to ensure that these victims are fully recovered and they can be integrated into society? I mean, the question is, can they really be integrated into society again? And can they function well and live like a normal human being with all these effects that they've experienced?
Yes, some of them can. Some of the cases that we receive, some of them actually can be integrated back into society. So in our shelter here, we provide psychosocial support, we provide counseling services too as well. So we take them through counseling services, and the counseling services entails a lot. I mean, like you talk about we talk about the trauma that you were in. I mean, like it's part of you letting go of what you have been through. So you talk about the trauma. We give you, we share how we can overcome what you have been through. It shouldn't define you now. And we talk about how when you leave, because the shelter, you can stay here, it's a 6-month period. So when you leave here, what are you going to do? If you have any ideas of what you want to do after you've been discharged from the shelter, if you want to go back to school, if you were in school, if you want to set up a business, and then we also usually talk to their families too as well, that when they are coming back, but then you shouldn't blame them for some of the things that you have, because as I said, there are some victims that we have received that they ran away from home. There was one victim who came in and was like, I'm a stubborn girl. I like the crazy life. I like the nightlife. Yes. So that's how I ended up in this situation. So we spoke to her family and we told them that no matter what the situation was initially, or if she may have been the cause of her own how do I put it, the cause of her own pain or whatever it is that she went through, do not blame her, do not victimize her. Just accept her, support her in any way that you can. So these are some of the things that we do to be able to help these traffic victims.
Okay, this brings us to the end of today's section. These are some of the things we can do. They need social support, economic support, and all the necessary support that we can give them to be stabilized in society. And it's good for us to also know that once we are in, it's difficult to get out of it. There is no window of escape. And I think that all of us, we have a role to play. We must continue educating people and sensitizing people about sex trafficking in order to make our society a good society and a better society to live in. Before ending today's program, I want you to know an amazing online resource that you may find helpful. And this is the eLibrary USA. The eLibrary USA is a state-of-the-art digital library with premium electronic databases. That includes digital newspapers, magazines, journals, videos, dissertations. Usually we have this resource available in person at our American spaces, but with the pandemic, we are opening up access to this resource. If you're interested, sign up using the link in the comment section, or just reach out to us, post a comment, and we will send you the form. This program was brought to you by the U.S. Embassy Ghana, American Corner Group, in partnership with Mobile Web Ghana. And that concludes our program for today. Please follow us on YouTube at US Embassy Ghana for more amazing virtual programs. Thank you all for joining today. Stay safe, observe all the COVID protocols, wash your hand under running water with soap for at least 20 seconds, practice social distancing, and also wear your mask in public. So we meet again next time for an exciting session. Thank you very much. And I thank our facilitator, Rabna, for this amazing education on sex trafficking. Thank you very much. Have a nice